almost 1 week since Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were sworn in as President and Vice President of the United States. Today, I talk one-on-one with Democratic strategist Antjuan Seawright to get his take on the new administration for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Antjuan Seawright, welcome back to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. Always a pleasure to be with you and your wonderful audience.
Oh, thank you so much. Obviously, you are a Democratic strategist, you're an entrepreneur, and obviously you are a political analyst. Let me ask you this. Obviously, President Biden and, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris were sworn in as President and Vice President, respectively, last week. Where are you emotionally?
You know, last week was a transformational moment, not just for me, but I think for the country and for the American experiment. I have to remind people that the American experiment is made up of our experiences. And when I talk about our experiences, in particular the Black experience. So to see the first Latino Supreme Court justice swear in the first Black woman with Indian descent to be the Vice President of the United States, it was everything our grandparents and great-grandparents could have ever thought to pray for. And then to see Scrappy Joe from Scranton, a man who 3 times ran for the office, but on the 3rd time, he came across the finish line first. And to see for the 2nd time in our nation's history, a Catholic, to be the United States president of the leader of the free world. It was a transformational moment. And then probably the moment that all of us was so moved by was to see Barack Obama and Michelle Obama come down that walkway and greet Kamala Harris. That moment will live in our hearts and minds. And for little Black boys and girls, for the first time, the only vice president they will know is a Black woman by the name of Kamala Harris, just like not too long ago for Black boys and girls who were born in the 2008 year. 2009, the only president they knew up until Donald Trump was Barack Obama.
And you talk about obviously that transformation. And what is the experiment like right now that Joe Biden is actually president?
Well, I think it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. I think this administration has hit the ground running, doing some blocking and tackling, blocking out this narrative that they will not be able to succeed and he's just going to be a 3rd term of Barack Obama, but really tackling the challenges of our day, starting with trying to get the economy back on track, at the same time wrapping their arms around this virus that has disproportionately impacted Black and brown communities. And so I think they're doing a heck of a job. I love the executive orders that he has signed right away. A lot of undoing what Donald Trump has done, but also setting the tone for what the next 4 years of this country is going to look like and what it's going to be under his watch.
And what should that tone be?
One, that America still can become that more perfect union we all dream about. But 2, you do not have to govern in a partisan way the way the previous president did in order to get things done. Joe Biden pledged that he may be elected as a Democratic president, Democratic candidate, but he's going to be an American president. So that means working with Democrats and Republicans to tackle some of the legislative challenges that need to be tackled that will cure or work towards a cure towards some of the problems we face today and the challenges of tomorrow.
And speaking of those issues, President Biden recently said that he plans to use taxpayers' money to rebuild America. What was his plan before this particular decision?
Well, you know, I think plans change with the moment. But here's what I know the president has been consistent about is 1, rebuilding the middle class, 2, getting his arms around this virus, 3, making certain that a vaccination distribution plan is implemented and they get to 100 million shots in 100 days. I think the smart thing the president has done was underpromise and perhaps will over-deliver on that, because the only way we're going to move in the next phase of recovery is making sure people are vaccinated and making sure that the right people are in line first to receive the vaccinations.
Now, President Biden reportedly urges Congress to pass more COVID relief. He says this quote, "There's nothing we can do to change the trajectory of the pandemic in the next several months." What got him from saying he had a plan to end the pandemic to now saying that there's nothing they can do to change the trajectory?
Well, no, what the president is saying is that we can't do anything about the virus existing, but what we can do is help minimize the damage going forward. And by minimizing damage, one is making sure people are back on track financially, but two, making sure there was a plan implemented to get people vaccinated, making sure, encouraging people to wear their mask. There was an implementation of a plan to make sure while you're traveling and so forth that masks are required, and then banning the travel from certain places where we know other strands of the virus could come into the United States and run havoc, perhaps worse than the previous strand of coronavirus.
Now, isn't his plan is to continue to do exactly what the federal government was doing in 2020?
There was no plan from the federal government in 2020. That's why you see all the chaos. Even those who worked for the previous president has said this publicly on a Face the Nation interview this past Sunday. There was no plan. There was no blueprint left behind. So no, they're not starting from scratch because the vaccine existed. But in terms of a vaccination plan getting to all 50 states and having a liaison to work with these states and be a go-between the federal government and the states, there was none of that before. And truthfully, a CDC who's willing to tell the truth about where we are, what is required in order for us to get past this virus.
And what should be required with his particular blueprint?
Well, I think first and foremost, making sure these states have the supplies they need. I was so pleased to hear and see him implement strategies and plans to make sure that production is up in all places. One, to expedite the vaccine, but also masks and all the other things that go along with trying to curb this virus and minimize the damage.
Now, let me get back to obviously what he said, what the president said when it comes to obviously using taxpayers' money to rebuild America. Will he just let the working class keep their taxes to spend on things that they actually need?
Well, part of letting the taxpayers' money work for them is the $1,400 stimulus proposal that the president wants to do in his $1.9 trillion relief package. Though that is taxpayers' money that the taxpayers should have gotten before he was elected president. But Mitch McConnell played politics in the Senate and would not do a $2,000 stimulus bill that the previous president, Democrats and Republicans, agreed to. So that's what I think. That's what he means by giving the taxpayers their money and making some large investments in infrastructure to help rebuild this country, including broadband access, as we heard so much from our leader, Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, and also getting schools the tools they need so we can get kids back into the classroom, but in a safe and a manner by which we do not put risk on the student or the teacher.
Now, what other projects will the money be used to rebuild America?
Well, there's several elements to the plan. What we know is not going to be how it ends up because there are already some Republican senators in Washington saying they may not necessarily agree with the language and the proposal from the president. But I think that's what makes Biden so special because no one knows how to negotiate and no one can work across the aisle, particularly when it comes to the U.S. Senate, better than Joe Biden can. So I'm confident we will get to a stimulus package or relief bill that the American people will be pleased with.
Now, how should he change that language?
Well, I think that's part of the negotiation process, and I can't speak for a Republican U.S. Senator. What I do know is people are hurting. I was pleased to see what he has done in terms of student loans, mortgage, not allowing people to be kicked out of their homes. I think there's some other steps that need to be taken place. But most importantly, I want to get kids back in school. I want to make sure 100 million people in 100 days get their vaccination, including my parents. I want to make sure that my sister, as a principal at Swansea High School, feels safe, and the students who come into our school, but also make sure our frontline workers are taken care of and have the resources they need so they can continue to be the glue to hold this country together.
Now, what 5-point plan would you want to hear from the President Biden when it comes to making certain that people are not being kicked out of their homes?
Well, I just want to make certain that there's a freeze on kicking people out of their homes. That's number one. Number two, for students, first-gen college students and those who are paying student loans like myself, I want to make sure that we freeze interest and do whatever we can from a federal perspective to make sure that's not another burden on top of the economic burdens that all of us are facing. I also want to make certain that we have access to capital for small businesses, particularly small and minority businesses that exist in this country that really have had the hammer beat them down tremendously because of this pandemic. And then finally, I want to make sure that our essential and our frontline workers have the resources and capabilities they need so they can continue to be successful.
Now, what would be the ideal capital for the small business and minority folks?
I think that varies by business to business. I'm very confident in the small business administrator and that office and their ability to do that. I'm also confident in the Congress and that hopefully in this next relief package we'll allocate even more funding, particularly to Black and brown businesses who, as you know, are sometimes hurt 2 times worse when these type catastrophic events happen.
And now let me reread. President Biden said he plans to use taxpayers' money, that is, to rebuild America. Do you foresee him actually increasing the corporate tax rate to rebuild America?
I think the people who pay more, obviously, over 50% of American people think they should, if they make more, they should pay more. I'm not sure in the end what that's going to look like. You have a lot of Republicans who that is a sticking point for them. They don't necessarily believe in this idea of tax increases. And all of a sudden now they care about debts and deficit, which they did not when it came to the previous administration, when the Trump tax cut increased our debt and deficit, I think, by somewhere around $2 trillion. And so we just have to see what the end looks like. But most importantly, Quintin, we're going to have to run on to see what the end is going to be.
Now, who else money should use to rebuild America?
Well, I think the only money we can use is taxpayers' money. That's why we pay taxes. And that's why those who make more should pay their fair share, because that helps rebuild the economy, helps rebuild the country.
Now, a lot of people ask me this too, but let me ask you this. How many of the taxpayers' money will actually go to foreign countries?
I'm not going to speak on what I do not know, because that I do not know. What I do know is Joe Biden has pledged to be an American president. He's encouraged the federal government to buy American goods. That's a big step towards showing you where his heart is and where his mind and thinking is. But I'm very confident that the taxpayers' dollars in this country will be used to rebuild this country.
Now, let me turn over to the transgenders people, obviously transgender people in the military. Obviously, President Biden said this, quote, "Today, I repeal the discriminatory ban on transgender people serving in the military. It's simple. America's safer when everyone qualified to serve can do so openly and with pride." But wasn't America safer even without this ban?
Not necessarily, Quintin. My father served in the military. So many relatives who currently serve. My best friend serves as well. When you sign up to serve this country, it shouldn't matter how you voted in the last election. It shouldn't matter your background, your story, where you come from, your financial, your socioeconomic status, all those things. You pledge to serve this country. And whoever wants to do that, there should not be any barriers to entry to do that. Because when you're in a foxhole and the enemy is coming at you, and trust me, they will for those who serve this country, we shouldn't ask them about their sexual orientation or any of that. We should just be, are you here to do the job you signed up for?
Now, how should the Biden administration, that is, update the documentation and military records for the transgender military members?
I think that's a wait and see item. I think it's coming. I think it's probably coming sooner than later. And I don't want to get ahead of the president, nor do I want to speak for him. But I'm very confident that the 80+ million people that elected Joe Biden to do the job trust him to do the right thing across the board.
Let me turn to filibustering. President Biden previously stated his position, according to NBC News, that he has not changed and therefore is opposed to ending the filibuster, which, as you know, protects the interests of a Senate majority. But doesn't that basically ensure losses for the president in 2022, Antjuan?
We'll see. We'll see. It's a marathon, not a sprint. What I know is that Joe Biden is going to be president, and he's going to let the U.S. Senate be the U.S. Senate. And they will make that determination. And however that shakes out, Quintin, and that will be the will, obviously, of the country, because that's what we elected that body to do.
Now, how should the White House weaponize the power of the Senate and the House majority?
I think they should just work with them. Democrats have slim and thin majorities in both. I think the White House has a responsibility to work with Democrats and Republicans, but I think those elected to the House and the Senate have a responsibility to serve the needs of the American people. And that includes working with this president where they can to pass legislation that will help move this country forward.
Will President Biden be a moderate president?
I think he will be an American president.
Does President Biden, in some people's mind, prefer the status quo?
I think Joe Biden has proven throughout his career that he will do whatever it takes to make this country what it can and what it should be. That includes working with Democrats and Republicans. That includes putting people around him that will help him in areas where he's not as strong, i.e. the Kamala Harrises of the world.
Now, what areas does he need to actually get stronger in?
Oh, I think that the biggest room in any house is the room for improvement. I think that Joe Biden knows that he comes from a different school of thought than the current makeup of Washington, D.C. and American politics. And that's why I am so proud and thankful for the cabinet he has put around him to help him get to a place where this country, one, gets out of the ditch, but two, level the playing field for everyday Americans.
Keystone Pipeline. I know that on day one of his administration, President Biden essentially canceled the Keystone Pipeline. What will be energy costs now that this cancellation has transpired?
We have to wait and see. I think that the president did what he thought was best based on those around him and based on what he knew. If you remember, this project started under the Barack Obama administration where he served as vice president. Right. So he knows enough to make that type of decision on day one. And I think that sets the tone for where his thinking is.
Will his energy policy conflict with his plan for job creation?
I don't think so.
Now, when you think of obviously issues with immigration and of course the stimulus package and obviously the Keystone Pipeline, how can President Biden unify the country while his fellow Democrats are pushing really to impeach a former president?
Well, just because you hold someone, you can't have unity without accountability. And just because you hold the previous president accountable does not mean that you can't bring the country together. We bring the country together by solving the issues and the challenges that this country faces. The Senate always has done more than one thing, and I don't think this will be any different. And if the will of the body is to not hold the president accountable, then we still move on. The good news is he's no longer in office.
Some troops, and let me turn back over to the military. I know that some troops are back in Syria and Iraq. What does that mean for America?
It means that we still have people away from their families. We still have the greatest military in the world defending us here at home. It also means that we have a lot of work to do. We have to continue to strengthen and build our military to the point to where our soldiers have whatever they need to be able to defend us, both abroad and at home.
And speaking of abroad, let me talk to you about the Paris deal. China is reportedly responsible for 28% of the world's carbon emissions. What enforcement should be in the Paris Accord to hold them accountable?
I'll leave that up to the president. Look, the good news is we're back into the Paris climate deal, something that Democrats and Republicans agreed we should have never gotten out of. But I'll let the president deal with energy policies. I'll let him deal with those issues abroad and at home. What I do know is climate change is real. And I think the priorities of this administration will reflect that.
Now, let me get back to the impeachment. Obviously, Senator Schumer basically told Rachel Maddow last night on MSNBC, hey, we want a fair but quick trial. We don't need too many witnesses. What exactly do you want to hear from the Senate?
I want them to do their job. I want the trial to be fair. I do not want it to reflect what happened the last time the president was impeached by the House. Lay out the facts, make the case, let the jury decide. The jury will be the U.S. Senate.
What should be the case, Antjuan?
I personally think the president should be held accountable for his actions. Democrats and Republicans agree with me, but I'm not one of the senators in that body to make that decision.
Now, let me go back to what you said on Twitter. You said this quote, you cannot govern if you do not win. Thankfully, we won. That's what you said on Twitter in response to the Democrats now having the majority in the Senate. And I know this might be a redundant question, but how should Democrats govern when with the majority in the Senate?
Well, we have the majority based on a +1 vote by the vice president. So be clear about that. Number two, I think we have to tackle the issues that Democrats promised on the campaign trail. And that's dealing with quality of life issues. I think the White House is sending a signal they want to work with Democrats and Republicans to get it done. And I think the House is going to do their job. I think Democrats in the Senate are going to do their job.
And now until 2022 for the midterms, what will that look like?
Passing consequential pieces of legislation, i.e. the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, because we know now Republicans are going to do everything they can to continue to suppress votes because we won another election. That means making sure that we expand the Affordable Care Act, making healthcare accessible and affordable, dealing with the pandemic and the vaccine, getting the stimulus bill passed, getting a real infrastructure bill passed so that this country can be up to speed and compete with the rest of the world. Quality of life issues that impact us every day.
And what are those other quality life issues that affect you locally?
Student loans, of course, that's a big one for me. Making sure towns and cities and local governments have the funding and necessary they need. Figure out a way for states who did not expand Medicaid so we can keep rural hospitals open. Just everyday things that impact people's everyday quality of life.
Antjuan Seawright, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin.
Thank you.